You know, I've had the opportunity and, quite frankly, the privilege of visiting with Larry Magid before. Larry is the CEO and co-founder of ConnectSafely.org. And most importantly, he is the resource when it comes to many things social media-wise. Let's bring him in. Larry, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Frances Haugen, she's my hero today. More than one day now. This is a woman that had the guts to take her career in a whole different place and to say what I believe is the truth about Facebook. Did they, and I'm going to throw this at you, did they prioritize profit over people, like she said?
You know, it's an interesting question, and it's a little bit complicated. Certainly they prioritize profit. There's no question about it. And certainly they do things that many people don't like. In fact, people on the left, people on the right, people who are concerned about child welfare, et cetera. I'm sure that they do prioritize profit. The question about whether they're doing what they should be doing around safety depends on who in the company you're talking about, and it depends on the specific policy. As I have mentioned, at least on radio in your market, if not on this show, I sit on their safety advisory board, and they do support my nonprofit. So I'm going to be very upfront about that, both so you understand where I'm coming from, and also the fact that I do have a little bit of inside information that I can share with you. And I can tell you that there are people in the company who really, really care about safety. There are other people in the company who really, really care about profit. And yes, there is tension between those two. So, you know, the question, for example, when it comes to children, I do think that they try very hard to protect the safety of children, but there are certain things that are difficult, like this whole issue of Instagram and images of teenage girls. Boy, that's a tough one because teenage girls are susceptible anyway, and there's no question that Instagram exposes you to people who you might want to look like but can't, no matter who you are.
You know, there's not many things going on in the halls of Congress right now that are bipartisan.
Yeah, I know.
There just aren't. You know, it's about as volatile and poisonous place as you can see. That being said, you know, listening to Frances, this taking a look at what Facebook does, this potential regulation of Facebook seems to be taking on a bipartisan tone, Larry.
You know, it's ironic when you consider the criticism against Facebook is that it divides people and creates anger, yet you're right, it's united the Democrats and Republicans, some for different reasons in some cases. Republicans have somewhat different concerns than Democrats, but over the broad issues that Ms. Hogan brought up, you're right. There was unanimity. Blackburn and Blumenthal, who I don't think can agree on what to have for breakfast, seem to agree on criticizing Facebook. So, and I think it's good that Congress is looking at it. I think it's good that there's been more transparency as a result of Ms. Hogan's testimony in the Wall Street Journal article. So I think that's all positive that we're looking at this very, very powerful institution, more powerful in many ways than banks and insurance companies and, for that matter, utility companies. In fact, there are some who suggest it should be regulated the way we regulate utilities.
How would you do that? If you were to, you know, there's been a lot of talk about regulating Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. You know, in today's world where, you know, with the algorithms, with, you know, how things all play out with instant access and the freedom of people to post. I mean, how would you regulate Facebook?
Well, I would hopefully do it smartly. And the reason I say that is because sometimes government regulation actually gets in the way of progress. Other times it can help progress. Like, from what I can tell, it appears the way the FDA is regulating COVID vaccine seems like a good thing, right? I mean, from everything I can see, I don't have full transparency. But one of the things I would do is I would have a board of experts involved in the regulatory process. I would not have a bunch of congressional Congress people sitting around deciding on how to respond to algorithms, because frankly, I don't think there's anybody in Congress who fully understands algorithms. I certainly don't. And I'm probably more tech savvy than your average senator or representative. So they need to bring in people who really understand this, and they need to look at unintended consequences of well-meaning legislation. You know, as somebody who's been involved in the legislative world, that sometimes the best intentions can create legislation that actually don't serve the needs of the constituencies. They need to really think through. But I do think the regulation is appropriate. Facebook has said they think regulation is appropriate, but that doesn't mean that Facebook should get to write the regulation. This should be written by people who fully understand it and who are indeed independent.
Well, where you're spot on, right, is that you can have great intentions and still have a bad piece of legislation. And it goes to exactly what you said earlier, which is you don't understand it. You know, you can sit there and want to do something, and your constituents can want you to do something, but if you don't understand the subject matter, all you're going to do is mess it up. In the world that you live in, Larry, you get a chance to visit with a lot of people with inside knowledge of the world of social media. Mm-hmm. How is Mark Zuckerberg perceived? Is it, you know, what does I don't mean the public. What does the world that you live in think of when you hear that name?
I think a lot of people think he's arrogant. You know, it also depends on when you ask the question. If you had asked me that question 15 years ago, he would have been seen as kind of this young, arrogant guy who really didn't understand much of what he was doing. I think Mark has matured over the years, and you know, I've interacted with him on several occasions myself. Walked by his house the other day, although he wasn't out in front. But generally speaking, I don't think he's the most beloved person in Silicon Valley. Some are jealous of him. Some think that he's arrogant. But I think everybody certainly gives him credit for having been very successful in building a company which, by financial metrics and by influence, is wildly successful. 3 billion users all over the world, plenty of money for their stockholders. In that regard, he's probably respected. But I don't know about how well he's liked from the standpoint of, is the company doing everything it can to protect its user base?
Well, and one of the reasons that I asked that, Larry, is because usually people that are very, very arrogant surround themselves with people that basically just add to the ego. They don't challenge. And it appears that Frances Haugen challenged.
Yeah, no, she did. But, you know, she's not alone. I mean, one of the things about Silicon Valley culture, you're generally right. But in Silicon Valley, you're going to have a lot of iconoclasts in any one of these companies, whether it's even Apple, which, you know, where people are not quite as vocal. But there are people in Facebook besides Frances Haugen who have pushed back. And there are people that are still there. And there are people even who have, to some extent, the ear of Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, their CEO, who are pushing back. And this is hard. I mean, you know, there's thousands of people who work for the company. And the one thing I will say, you could call it defense, whatever, many of these issues are nuanced. Again, it's like well-meaning legislation. The issue, for example, of, you know, you talk about free speech versus hate speech. I hate hate speech, but I also love free speech. And so even in my own head, there's some nuances as to what should they do. And sometimes they make decisions purely based on profit. Other times they make decisions trying to balance different rights and different nuanced positive things or negative, or you know, such as, should we give people more free speech, which would please some people? Should we cut back on hate speech, which should please other people? And you can fight those battles day in and day out, and people that are very well-meaning can disagree over those. And as I said, even I am mixed on them. I belong to the ACLU, but at the same time, I support the ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League. I mean, I think they're both right. And we have to figure out a way to make this work. And Facebook is caught up in this. Very, very well said. More and more people are coming out there ready to go to Congress and testify against Facebook. In the 30 or so seconds we have left, Larry, do you think this is snowball? Do you think it's rolling downhill on Zuckerberg? It's going to snowball, and there will be legislation. But it's again, I'm not betting that it's going to be really good legislation. I'm hoping it is. And I'm hoping somebody in Washington is listening and they do bring in the right people to advise them before they start writing laws.
Larry, people are going to want to know where they can read more from you. Can you tell them where to go?
Yeah, connectsafely.org. I think you can see our logo behind me, so it's just connectsafely.org. Or if you want to look at my personal stuff, at larrysworld.com.
Yeah. Larry, you're good. You're really great to talk to. I appreciate you coming on.